do you say?
Well, first of all, I'm for affirmative action temporarily, but for two reasons. First of all, you have to look at the university's purpose. It is to educate their students. And I feel that different races, people coming from different races have different backgrounds and they contribute differently to the education. And second of all, when you say they have equal backgrounds, that's not true when you look at the broader picture and you look at slavery. And this is kind of a reparation. I think affirmative action is a temporary solution to alleviate history and the wrongs done to African Americans in particular.
And what's your name?
David.
David, you say that affirmative action is justified, at least for now, as a way of compensating for past injustice, the legacy of slavery and segregation.
Right.
Who wants to take on that argument? We need now a critic of affirmative action. Yes, go ahead.
I think that what happened in the past has no bearing on what happens today, and I think that discriminating based on race should always be wrong, whether you're discriminating against one group or another. Just because our ancestors did something doesn't mean that that should have any effect on what happens with us today.
All right, good. I'm sorry, your name is?
Kate?
Kate. All right, who has an answer for Kate? Yes.
I just wanted to comment and say that...
Tell us your name.
My name is Mansour. Because of slavery, because of past injustices, today we have a higher proportion of African Americans who are in poverty, who face less opportunities than white people. And so because of slavery 200 years ago, and because of Jim Crow, and because of segregation, today we have injustice based on race.
Kate?
I think that there are differences, obviously, but the way to fix those differences is not by some artificial fixing of the result. You need to fix the problem. So we need to address differences in education and differences in upbringing with programs like Head Start and giving more funding to lower income schools rather than trying to just fix the result so it makes it look like it's equal when really it isn't.
Yes.
Well, with regard to affirmative action based on race, I just want to say that white people have had their own affirmative action in this country for more than 400 years. It's called nepotism and quid pro quo. So there's nothing wrong with correcting the injustice and discrimination that's been done to black people for 400 years.
Good. Tell us your name.
Hannah?
Hannah. All right, who has an answer for Hannah? And just to add to Hannah's point, because we need now someone to respond. Hannah, you could have also mentioned legacy admission.
Exactly. I was going to say, if you disagree with affirmative action, you should disagree with legacy admission, because it's obvious from looking around here that there are more white legacies than black legacies in the history of Harvard University.
And explain what legacy admissions are.
Well, legacy admissions is giving an advantage to someone who has an arbitrary privilege of their parent having attended the university to which they're applying.
All right, so a reply for Hannah. Yes, in the balcony. Go ahead.
First of all, if affirmative action is making up for past injustice, how do you explain minorities that were not historically discriminated against in the United States who get these advantages? In addition, you could argue that affirmative action perpetuates divisions between the races rather than achieve the ultimate goal of race being an irrelevant factor in our society.
And tell us your name.
Danielle?
Hannah?
I disagree with that, because I think that by promoting diversity in an institution like this, you further educate all of the students, especially the white students who grew up in predominantly white areas. It's certainly a form of education to be exposed to people from different backgrounds, and you put white students at an inherent disadvantage when you surround them only with their own kind.
Why should race necessarily be equated with diversity? There's so many other forms. Why should we assume that race makes people different? Again, that's perpetuating the idea of racial division within our universities and our society.
Hannah?
With regard to African American people being given a special advantage, it's obvious that they bring something special to the table because they have a unique perspective, just as someone from a different religion or socioeconomic background would as well. As you say, there are many different types of diversity. There's no reason that racial diversity should be eliminated from that criteria.
Yes, go ahead.
Racial discrimination is illegal in this country, and I believe that it was African American leaders themselves when Martin Luther King said he wanted to be judged not on the color of his skin, but by the content of his character, his merit, his achievements. And I just think that to decide solely based on someone's race is just inherently unfair. I mean, if you want to correct based on disadvantaged backgrounds, that's fine, but there are also disadvantaged white people as well. It shouldn't matter if you're white, black.
Tell us your name.
Ted.
Ted?
Yes.
Think of Hopwood. It's unfair to count race, or I assume you would also say ethnicity or religion.
Yes.
Do you think she has a right to be considered according to her grades and test scores alone?
No, there is more to it than that. Universities need to promote diversity. And
So you agree with the goal of promoting diversity?
There's ways to promote diversity besides discriminating against people solely based on a factor that they cannot control.
All right, so what makes it wrong is that she can't control her race. She can't control the fact that she's white. That's the heart of the unfairness to her. Bree made a similar point, that basing admissions on factors that people can't control is fundamentally unfair. What do you say?
There's a lot of things you can't control, and if you're going to go through it based on merit, like just based on your test scores, a lot of what you can achieve has to do with like the family background that you raised in. If both your parents were scholarly, then you have more of a chances of actually being more scholarly yourself and getting those grades. And you can't control what kind of family you were born into. So
All
I
right,
mean,
good. That's a great rejoinder. What's your name?
Da.
Da. Ted, are you against advantages that come from the family you were born into? What about legacy admission?
I mean, I do believe that in terms of like a legacy admission, you shouldn't have a special preference. I mean, there is a legacy admission you could argue is another part of diversity. You could say it's important to have a small percentage of people that have just several generation family attendance at a place like Harvard. However, that should not be an advantaged factor like race. That should just be another part of promoting diversity.
Should it count at all?
I think that
Alumni status, should it count at all, Ted?
yes, it should count.
All right. I want to step back for a moment from these arguments. Thank you all for these contributions. We're going to come back to you. If you've listened carefully, I think you will have noticed 3 different arguments emerge from this discussion in defense of considering race and ethnicity as a factor in admissions. One argument has to do with correcting for the effects of educational disadvantage. That was Anisha's argument. This is what we might call the corrective argument. Correcting for differences in educational background, the kind of school people went to, the opportunities they had, and so on. That's one argument. What's worth noticing, though, is that that argument is consistent in principle with the idea that only academic promise and scholarly potential should count in admissions. We just need to go beyond test scores and grades alone to get a true estimate of academic promise and scholarly ability.